Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 62 of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. Alright, last we left off, things were pretty up in the air. The counter alchemical circle had sort of done its job. Father was drained of the vast majority of Emestrian souls that he had acquired. So now he's sort of forced to essentially use his godlike power to yank the souls out of any random soldiers he comes across. This would be efficacious were it not for Hohenheim and the others sort of interceding. And, it's probably a stretch to say Hohenheim, Alphonse, Izumi, and everyone else that they're a match for Father, but, Father's certainly not in a good way here. He's basically hemorrhaging souls and power. I guess the right strategy here is to just sort of run out the clock, wait for him to burn out, basically. Seeing as how he's trying to, in essence, contain God in an insufficient container. So it seems as though Father is calling Hohenheim's bluff, as it were. The idea being that you're just that little dwarf in the flask, you're not a god, you cannot create life, but he's certainly creating a reasonable facsimile as we speak. I mean, this isn't true life necessarily. I think it's more that he's just giving bodies back to the souls that he had swallowed. Naturally, we see some characters we've seen before, King Xerxes being chief among them. I feel this is a rather sick level of depravity on Father's part, because, these souls, they've been trapped for who knows how long, and they're sort of being given this false hope in the form of what are presumably temporary bodies just to make a point. It really is a needlessly cruel thing to do, but I suppose if Father were anything resembling a human in substance, naturally this line of inquiry would not occur to him. What if I did this? Would that demoralize everyone? Yeah, it seems it's rather unfortunate that all these reinforcements, essentially, they don't really know what's truly going on. I mean, I guess it's rather fortunate that Greed is here to help, He's pointing them in the right direction, he's telling the injured people to step aside, seeing as how they're not going to be any good. It is interesting that Greed would sort of presume to boss people around, considering his status. Oh dear. So this really does put things back into perspective, If half of the compound's been blown up, then surely a whole bunch of people are no longer among the living. So this really lends credence to what Greed's saying, If you're injured, there's definitely nothing you can do, and even if you're in good health, you're maybe marginally useful. Yeah, this is another instance of Major General Armstrong being my favorite character. Despite her injuries, despite not being an alchemist, she's still willing to head to the front lines, if only so that she can lead from the front, rather than, sit and do nothing. I certainly sympathize with that line of thinking, If you're in charge, and you're in charge in a way that's meaningful, it really behooves you to lead from the front. And seeing as how Major General Armstrong was in charge of essentially the most difficult front of Amestris, then, leading from the front is practically a necessity. Nevertheless, she does have the good grace to actually sit aside. Now, it is interesting that Mustang, despite being blind, and Hawkeye only marginally recovered from having her throat slashed. The two of them are sort of given a pass. And, it seems to me that the logic is kind of faulty, because, yeah, Mustang's effectively artillery, but I don't know. Yeah, Hawkeye can point him in the right direction, but I feel like the two of them working together present far greater a target than either one of them would on their own, acting at their full capacity. So this is interesting, because I figured the Major General would have said something about Wrath's appearance. It's like, oh, he's, old and shriveled up now, as though everything up until this point had been merely a facade. Well, that's a nice little send-off for the erstwhile captain. As it turns out, he was rather pivotal. Oh dear. Well, it seems on the surface things aren't going particularly well. We just sort of snap here to Mei Chang having been considerably beaten. I can't imagine everybody else is doing remarkably well if she's not too well. Oh dear, that's right. Oh man. So Alphonse has sacrificed himself in a very real and meaningful way to protect Mei. I suppose out of everyone he has the best chance of surviving, but seeing as how the blast wrought such ruin on his armor, death is certainly a very real possibility. Oh dear indeed. It seems like everybody is far worse off. So I guess at the very least, Ed is capable of getting up, albeit barely. His automail arm is certainly in shambles. And it seems like everybody has sort of made some sort of heroic sacrifice one way or another. I guess... Yeah, I guess I was wrong earlier. Discounting Hohenheim, Alphonse is certainly the most durable, but given his regenerative abilities, Hohenheim is certainly capable of withstanding a lot. Well, it's unfortunate that Father sort of caught everyone flat-footed, and now he's sort of got free run here. He can just rip people's souls out at will. Now this is nice. The Brig soldiers, intrepid as always, despite being ridiculously outgunned, are still doing their part to help. It's not like they have any realistic hope of killing Father, or barely even slowing him down, really, but nevertheless, they've brought mortars and everything, too, I don't know if I'd be so keen on using mortars at such short range, but I don't know, if nothing else, I commend the Brig soldiers for their bravery. Unfortunately, they don't really seem to know the true weight of everything that's going on, seeing as how they're surprised that the mortars weren't as effective as they would have liked. I guess, how could they really know what they're dealing with here if they're just soldiers not trained in alchemy? And, that said, training in alchemy wouldn't necessarily prepare you for something like this. If Father is able to shrug off anti-tank weapons with, well, contemptuous ease. Even Mustang's fire isn't wholly effective either, and it certainly packs quite more of a punch than machine guns or mortars, but I'd imagine it's little more than holding up a little Bic lighter to a building. So it's interesting that Mustang is sort of relying on that little clapping technique. It's certainly handy, I'd imagine. You have no need for any of the transmutation circles, which have been usually his weak point. I feel like the truth here and the knowledge it's imparted in Mustang makes him infinitely more dangerous than he was before. If only he weren't blind. So everybody's really doing everything they can, despite being tired and injured and generally wary of what's happened. I don't imagine having your soul partially dragged out of your body is a particularly refreshing experience. Even so, I feel like, Greed's sort of hanging back deliberately. And he professes that he wants to steal this power for himself, but I don't know. I feel like if he really truly meant that, he would be doing something rather than just sitting back and waiting. So it would seem as though that Link can, to a degree, see through all his bluster. Maybe Greed's not being totally untruthful, but he's certainly not telling the entirety of the truth either. It is rather unfortunate that after everything they've done, Father is still totally unscathed, at least by all appearances. We, the audience, sort of know that he's running on limited time here, considering that he desperately needs more Philosopher's Stones to sustain himself, considering that that entire country full of souls he was hoping to absorb didn't actually pan out. So, this is bad. Greed decided to butt in, but in doing so, he's really just provided Father with the Philosopher's Stone he was seeking. So this is, this is almost the worst possible situation, had it not been for Greed pulling a bit of a fast one. So I guess the idea here is that Greed is hoping to wrest control of everything from Father. And, it's not necessarily a bad idea, but whether or not it pans out remains to be seen. I'd imagine it's rather hard to sort of fight with the person's arms sticking out of your face like that. If only because it throws off the momentum of your movement and everything. You have to jostle around a whole nother mass. Man, it really seems as though nothing they're doing is having any effect. At least not initially. Well, I guess a better way to phrase it is, what they're doing isn't having any effect. He's just sort of crumbling under his own weight. So I guess Hohenheim is nice enough to spell it out for those of us sitting in the audience here. He really is crumbling under his own weight, so if you just sort of leave him to his own devices and prevent him from getting any more souls, he'll just sort of gutter and flicker out like a dying candle. So despite that little explosion there, he's not quite dead yet. He's certainly in a bad state, but I think it's reasonable to conclude that everybody else is just as poor off as him, if not worse. So this is truly a dire situation. Ed is the closest available target. He's missing his prosthetic arm, and his other arm's been impaled on a piece of rebar. There's very little he can do. I'd imagine that's gotta be cripplingly painful to be impaled in such a way. Because, that looks like it's going right through, the center of the arm, which, your upper arm, there's only, one bone. It's not like your forearm where you sort of have, two bones running in parallel. So the situation is truly dire. Alphonse can't do anything without rupturing his armor further and killing himself. But he seems to have stumbled onto the idea that maybe killing himself is precisely the only thing that can be of use. I'd have to admit, it's certainly a scary prospect, to willingly embrace death for the sake of someone else. It's gotta be a difficult thing to do. It's gotta be difficult on everyone. He's essentially asking someone else to help him, to help facilitate this. I like the little details in how this is animated, where, maybe Ed doesn't quite know what's going on here, but he has an idea and he doesn't like it. I kind of wonder about the choice of music here, because it seems to me that this particular track in the soundtrack is more indicative of mischief than, drama or action. I guess that's sort of suitable when you consider Alphonse is now interacting with the truth and is essentially pulling a fast one to deny Father his victory. I don't know, maybe I'm just speculating here. The music, up until this point at least, had a somewhat mischievous tone in my mind. I don't think it's necessarily a bad choice, but it makes me think a little bit. So now, Alphonse is in like a weird state of limbo. His soul and his body are together, but they're sort of camped out in front of the gate. At this point, I'd imagine he's not truly alive, not truly dead, but he's certainly not capable of going anywhere. So once again, Edward is now empowered to fight back, and I do like the little details like his arm being sort of discolored and the fingernails being long and ragged, because, he hasn't had this arm for, however many years, so he hasn't, taken care of it from a maintenance perspective, like cutting your fingernails. It's a little thing, but it indicates to me that there was some care that was put into this. So this is a sure sign that Father is really not capable of doing much of anything anymore if Edward by himself can basically mop the floor with him in physical combat. I mean, I have to wonder why nobody else is stepping up to help, but I guess if Edward can handle things on his own, there's no need. So while all this is going on, Greed's having a little realization of his own that, yeah, he does want everything. Greed being his purview. But most of all, he wants good friends like these. And, I mean, in a sense, he does kind of have it now. So, maybe world domination isn't for him after all. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.